Tonight, miracle on the Hudson. A jetliner filled with passengers crashes in the frigid waters off Manhattan, and everyone on board survives. We'll have the latest on how the skill of the pilots and the heroics of first responders prevented a disaster. I'm Katie Couric, just a few hundred yards from the scene of the crash. Survivors here faced frigid temperatures, but New York City isn't the only place in the deep freeze. Dangerous below-zero temperatures grip the nation from the Midwest to the Northeast. And overseas, Israeli artillery hits a UN compound in Gaza, where hundreds of Palestinians had taken shelter.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
And good evening, everyone. As you can imagine, it was an incredible, almost surreal scene here in New York City. Just behind me in the Hudson River, a jetliner with more than 150 people on board actually floating here in the freezing waters. And one by one, every one of the passengers and crew was rescued. US Airways Flight 1549 had just taken off from LaGuardia Airport in Queens for Charlotte, North Carolina, when it apparently hit a flock of birds, knocking out both of the plane's engines. Even without power, though, the pilots managed to maneuver the Airbus A320 northward over the Bronx, make a sharp turn south, then follow the Hudson River alongside Manhattan Island, losing altitude along the way, and finally coming to rest on the river. And then that's when, as Randall Pinkston tells us, emergency crews suddenly stepped into action. Randall?
Katie, considering the freezing temperatures and the speed of that plane when it hit the water, the passengers, the aviation experts, everyone says it's a miracle that everyone survived.
I'm sure we're all glad we're alive, man, so God bless.
US Airways to Charlotte crash-landed in the Hudson River shortly after takeoff from New York's LaGuardia Airport.
Less than 2 minutes up in the air, it was a big boom. Everybody smelled smoke.
The captain came on and says, look, we're going down. Brace for impact.
It was just moments into the flight when the plane's pilot radioed air controllers. He had lost both engines after hitting what may have been a flock of birds.
As we got lower and lower, the pilot said brace for impact.
Everyone kind of looked at each other and said some prayers. You know, I said about 5 Our Fathers, 5 Hail Marys, and we hit the water.
Witnesses watched as the plane began a gradual descent, reviving memories for some of September 11th.
It's coming down, it's just right in the water.
Yeah. We thought it was going to veer in and hit a building, actually.
It was pretty scary.
The plane then skimmed across the water 100 yards or more before coming to a rest just off Midtown Manhattan.
Right past the piers, and it just, no smoke, but it just landed. When it landed, threw up a whole bunch of water.
These photos show dozens of passengers huddled on the jet's wings waiting for rescue. Many New Yorkers could only watch from the windows of their office buildings, including CBS News.
As I looked out and I saw the life rafts come out, sort of open up from the plane, I grabbed a pair of binoculars and was able to see people standing on the aircraft wings. They seemed pretty calm. It wasn't so chaotic as I would expect it to be.
Nearby, commuter ferries pulled up within minutes, pulling aboard passengers and crew. Rescuers face 3 more challenges: a sinking airplane, frigid water, and strong currents pulling the jet downriver.
They did a phenomenal job getting everybody out. Phenomenal.
In an emergency, the Airbus jet is designed to fly on one engine to a nearby airport. But this seems to be the rare case when the plane lost both engines.
It is an extraordinarily rare event that both engines go out. It's not so unusual that a single engine goes out, or you get hit and your windscreen gets cracked, but to lose both engines is a 1 in a million shot.
Many of the passengers are being treated at hospitals in New York and New Jersey for injuries, including shock and possible hypothermia.
What do you need a redo of?
A former military pilot once told me that anytime you can get off a plane safely, it's a good landing. Today, the pilot of that U.S. Airjet made a very good landing. Katie?
All right, Randall Pinkston. Randall, thanks very much. Now, you can only imagine the fear among the passengers during those few minutes. The plane was in the air and then, of course, landed in the water. Joining me now is David Sanderson. He was one of the last passengers out of the plane. And David, first of all, how are you doing right now? What were your experiences as a result of this? Do you have any injuries?
I'm much better now, Katie. Thank you for asking it. The staff had done an outstanding job in taking care of me, so thank you to them. No, the pilot gets all the credit. When I was watching how it was coming down, there was no way he could have landed on the ground. He did the right thing, so I give him all the credit. It was pretty much controlled chaos on the plane, and
can you tell me, David, sort of what happened? Because I understand you were only in the air for about 6 minutes. Can you just give me the details of what transpired before the plane went into the water?
Yeah, I heard an explosion, and I looked down. I saw some flames coming out from underneath the wing, and I showed the guy next to me. I said something happened, but he should be able to land it. But unfortunately, he started coming down pretty quick. So once he said that brace for impact, pretty much everybody paid attention to him doing that. But then when he went down, it was pretty significant hit coming down. Fortunately for me, I just hit my head and I came back up. But getting people off the plane was quite a challenge. But everybody did the right thing and got off the plane. And we got the people on the lifeboat as quickly as we could. And fortunately, we got everybody out. And I was fortunate.
Was it a pretty? Yeah. I'm sorry. We're having some audio problems, David. I'm sorry to interrupt, but was it a pretty orderly evacuation?
As orderly as it could be under the circumstances. People were climbing over the seats and coming down the aisles, but it was for such a tragic situation. People did as well as they possibly could in the situation.
And you were the last one out of the plane. I understand you were actually in the plane after it landed for 7 minutes. Was it filling up with water? What was it like inside that plane for those 7 minutes?
Yeah, once we got everybody out, I stood in the plane to make sure everybody was out, and it was filling up pretty rapidly, and it got up to about waist level. And then when everybody was out in the lifeboats, I then stepped out on the edge there, and it was about knee deep at that point. And then stepped down on the wing, and then it was waist deep again. And then at that point, the boats were already there taking people up, and I just jumped in and started trying to swim to the first boat I could find. So fortunately, someone pulled me up on the boat because I didn't have much use of my lower extremities at that point. And they pulled me up and threw me on the boat, and thank God that they did.
Well, we're very glad you're safe, and it sounds like you were very heroic in making sure that all those passengers were out. And do you have hypothermia or any physical ailments as a result of this? Fortunately, feeling is coming back in my lower extremities right now, and other than a bang on the shin, I knew that I felt it when I jumped out. I'm good to go. So once again, they're taking great care of me here at the hospital. All right. Well, we're really happy to hear that you're safe. David Sanderson, thanks so much for taking time out to talk with us tonight. We appreciate it so much. You're welcome, Katie. Thank you. Okay, let's go now to talk about bird strikes. They're a lot more common than you may think. According to the FAA, from 1990 until 2007, planes have hit birds nearly 80,000 times. In more than 9,000 cases, the damage was in fact serious, and 11 people have died as a result. More on the dangers of bird strikes from our chief investigative correspondent, Armin Katayan.
When it came to the cause of the crash, Flight 1549 appears to have been a textbook case of a bird strike. Experts say the vast majority of collisions with birds occur at low altitude during landing or takeoff. Jet engines are particularly vulnerable during takeoff when they are turning at very high speed.
The danger from birds around airports is really engine ingestion.
A flock of birds, as in the case of 1549, are considered especially dangerous, leading to multiple engine failure. That's because as birds are violently sucked into the engine and against the blades, those blades can be ripped apart, resulting in catastrophic failure.
If it gets into the core of the engine, where the fuel is actually burned, it can disrupt that burning of fuel and cause a loss of power and even a flame out.
The amount of damage also depends on the size of the bird. To better understand bird strikes, aircraft manufacturers are known to fire chickens into engines as part of the testing and certification process. There were more than 5,000 bird strikes in 2007, but only about 10% resulting in damage. The FAA estimates bird and wildlife strikes cost airlines in the U.S. more than $600 million a year and have caused more than 200 deaths worldwide since 1988. Today, however, thanks to the remarkable efforts of 2 pilots and 3 flight attendants, that death toll never moved. Armin Katay, CBS News, New York.
Now, as we've said, and as you can probably tell, it is brutally cold here in New York. In fact, half the nation is in a deep freeze all the way into the deep south, but the Midwest is getting the worst of it. How cold was it in Chicago? So cold, they closed the ice skating rinks. Cynthia Bowers is there.
This stunning scene of Lake Michigan is a beauty, but the weather in Chicago today is a beast. You know it's brutal when it's too cold to start your snowblower. Temperature 11 below zero, wind chill 27 below. Chicago cop Tom Palma walks a 7-hour beat.
How you doing today?
Searching alleyways for homeless folks while fighting to keep warm. How many layers?
2 pairs of socks, long johns, 3 t-shirts. I've got my sweater, uniform shirt.
Records toppled today across the Midwest. It was negative 42 in Aberdeen, South Dakota, minus 44 in Bismarck. Sioux City, Iowa plunged to negative 22. Spencer, Iowa to minus 27. It is hard even for hardy Midwesterners.
You want to bend at the knees and not strain your back too much and get one of those.
Arctic air also blasting New England with the coldest winter in 5 years. And the southeast, too, is freezing cold. Forecast wind chill in Nashville, 12 below zero. Dangerous cold that helped save the life of a Kansas City teen, trapped underwater for 30 minutes after her car ran off the road. Rescuers say the 14-degree water temperature slowed her system enough to keep her from drowning, and say remarkably she should be okay. For the rest of us, though,
I'm about to freeze to death.
To illustrate in a way no words can, watch what the weather did in Mankato, Minnesota. Meet the frozen banana hammer.
Broke your hammer.
Stunts aside, this cold is made more dangerous by its duration. Here in Chicago, we're going on 19 hours below zero, and it won't warm up till midday tomorrow. Katie?
All right, Cynthia Bowers. Cynthia, thank you so much. And one more note about the weather. It is expected to be very chilly in Washington next Tuesday for the inauguration, just above freezing, and forecasters are advising spectators to dress in layers. Turning now to the war in Gaza, Israel's foreign minister is flying to Washington tonight to talk with Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice about the situation there and the ceasefire plan. Meanwhile, Richard Roth reports the fighting continues.
With Gaza City bombed and burning, Palestinians heeded Israel's warning to get out of the way, but found they had nowhere to go. What's a safe place for us to go, the woman cried. Not the UN compound where 700 people took shelter. Israeli artillery hit it, then hit it again. 3 people were injured and food and other aid went up in flames. Israel claimed it was returning fire from militants. Burning with rage, the UN denied that.
Let's have an investigation. Let's find out what happened. Let the facts speak for themselves.
In the pounding of Gaza's crowded capital, Israel killed the Hamas leader in charge of security. An Israeli general said, "We need to use force like Americans in Iraq. Hamas needs to be snuffed out." But the attack also hit the Reuters news agency office, threatening the small press corps in Gaza, which Israel's keeping small by keeping most foreign reporters out. 2 journalists from Abu Dhabi were wounded. And at Gaza's biggest hospital, there were more small children in the stream of casualties than men of fighting age. Palestinians say the war's death toll is above 1,000 now, with at least half the casualties civilian.
It could be last-minute gains Israel's after in Gaza with the stepped-up attacks on the ground. Because along with all the smoke in the air, there's a feeling now this may soon be ending.
Israel's leaders tonight have backed a U.S. plan designed to prevent Hamas from smuggling weapons into Gaza, including the rockets that touched off this fight, like the Hamas rocket that fell here in Israel today, injuring a 7-year-old boy.
But an actual ceasefire agreement is still to be worked out, and Israel's defense chief tonight warned his armed forces will fight up to the last minute. Katie?
Richard Roth reporting from Tel Aviv for us tonight. Richard, as always, thank you so much. And coming up next, right here on the CBS Evening News, a costly settlement by pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly. Back now at the scene of the US Airways crash here in New York City earlier this afternoon. In other news, though, tonight the drug maker Eli Lilly will pay out nearly $1.5 billion to end a criminal investigation of its marketing practices. Cheryl Atkinson has that story.
Alicia Adams started taking Zyprexa for bipolar disorder when she was just 18. In a matter of months, she ballooned from 93 pounds to 170 and developed severe diabetes.
The depression got worse. I closed myself off from everyone, stayed in my bedroom. I didn't do much of anything.
Today, Eli Lilly, which makes Zyprexa, pled guilty to charges so egregious they're criminal, marketing the sometimes dangerous drug in ways never proven safe or effective. Zyprexa is only FDA approved to treat a specific bipolar disorder and severe schizophrenia, but millions have taken it for unapproved or so-called off-label use, children in foster care, people who have trouble sleeping, elderly in nursing homes. Prosecutors say Eli Lilly engaged an army of thousands of sales reps in widespread illegal marketing.
Trained to use the slogan 5 at 5, meaning 5 milligrams at 5 o'clock at night will keep those elderly patients quiet.
Problem is, Zyprexa has serious side effects, including weight gain, diabetes, even heart failure. Shah Ramahari is a former Eli Lilly sales rep and told his story for an education project for doctors.
Seizures, things like that happen as well. And those are, pretty catastrophic side effects to have in your patients.
Eli Lilly has agreed to pay $1.4 billion, including the largest criminal fine ever imposed on a corporation. Ironically, that's about as much as the company's Zyprexa sales in the first quarter of last year. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
And we'll have more news right after this. It was a day of comings and goings in the U.S. Senate chamber. Hillary Clinton said goodbye after the Senate Foreign Relations Committee voted 16-1 in favor of her appointment as the next Secretary of State. After 36 years, incoming Vice President Joe Biden officially resigned his seat, and Roland Burris of Illinois was sworn in to the U.S. Senate by Vice President Cheney, filling in the seat once held by Barack Obama. Also on Capitol Hill today, the president-elect's pick to become Attorney General, Eric Holder, faced some tough questions from Republicans during his confirmation hearing. As Deputy Attorney General, he supported President Clinton's controversial pardon of fugitive financier Mark Rich. Holder's hearing resumes tomorrow. And it is the strongest evidence yet of possible life on Mars. NASA scientists have discovered large amounts of methane along with water vapor in the Martian atmosphere. Scientists don't know where the methane came from, possibly volcanoes. But there's also a chance living microbes produced it, or it could be left over from organisms that are now extinct. When we come back, an update on the US Airways crash earlier today in New York City. And now a quick recap of the plane crash that happened here in the Hudson River here in New York City earlier today about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. US Airways flight 1549 had just taken off from LaGuardia Airport for Charlotte, North Carolina, when it apparently hit a flock of birds. It knocked out both engines, but without power, the pilots managed to maneuver the Airbus A320 northward over the Bronx, make a sharp turn south, and follow the Hudson River alongside the island of Manhattan, losing altitude along the way, and finally coming to rest on the river. Meanwhile, all 155 passengers on board were rescued one by one. Many have been treated for exposure or hypothermia, and many are hospitalized right now in area hospitals. Bob Orr is our CBS News aviation expert. And Bob, we should point out that the pilots, the actions of the pilots were really incredibly heroic.
Katie, frankly, I still can't believe it happened this way, and it's not too strong to say this was a miracle. When you consider the scenario, this plane takes off from LaGuardia, everything is fine. It's about 4,000 feet in the air when the pilots radio that they've been hit by a flock of birds. First one engine goes out, quickly the other engine goes out. Now the plane is literally dead in the air with no power, and the pilots radio air traffic controllers and say, I'm going to try to glide to Teterboro, a small airport in North Jersey. When it becomes clear that's not even a possibility, They turn the plane. They keep it under control with no power. They missed the GW bridge by 900 feet and then feather the plane down to the water. We have to tell you, by our calculations, it hit the water at about 150 miles an hour. It is remarkable. It did little damage to the aircraft. It did not break the fuselage. They managed to get all the doors open, the slides deployed, and everybody on that plane came out. It's an unbelievable event, and it's not too strong to say that these pilots did a heck of a job flying that plane today. Katie?
And I think that we should, okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you. And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. The CBS Early Show will, of course, have complete details of the US Airways crash tomorrow morning. And I'll be back at 8 Eastern, 7 Central with live coverage of President Bush's farewell address to the nation. Until then, I'm Katie Couric in New York. I'll see you later.